fuck everything about these two chapters in this entire game. This is all representative of a very shoddy product rushed out the door by money-hungry executives, and they devoted little to no time to ensuring that these chapters were properly polished. Hello everyone, welcome to my Resident Evil 4 Remake. Professional difficulty, no damage, no New Game Plus items, no charms, worse through. Whether I'll be doing no merchant or not, that remains to be seen. And these are chapters 5 and 6. Easily the most broken, most unfinished, most unpolished chapters I have ever played in any game ever. And I was originally going to put a blooper section for both of these chapters in this one video, but the bloopers, I must have gotten at least 2 hours worth of bloopers for both chapters 5 and 6. And these are very short chapters, but the way they're designed, the way the enemies are placed, the way Ashley continually fucks you all the fucking time, the way the stealth is so badly handled, the way the combat sections are badly handled, it is of a whole other level entirely. And I mentioned many times that this game represents a new trend, how it defines or redefines a new level of incompetency. But playing these chapters again on professional difficulty, it's way, way below that new level of incompetency. And I'm not going to put the bloopers in this one video. I feel like it's just going to be lost so easily because you're not going to be able to find it on my channel. I have to represent the bloopers and just bring them to light in a single video. I mean, the poor designs of this game are of a whole other level. I have never played a game as bad as this one. I have never played a game where common sense is just thrown out the window, and instead they decide to favor the most rudimentary schema possible with designing a game that doesn't even feel like a fucking game. It doesn't even feel like a fucking alpha! It feels like it's at a stage where it wasn't even in the alpha. This game should have never been fucking released to the public in this pitiful state, and you have people like Under the Mayo defending this game, or all the other toxic fans out there, and I guarantee you guys, the poor designs video I'm going to showcase from chapters 5 and 6, alongside the other potential poor designs I will definitely find with this game, it will all culminate in the longest poor design series I have ever done for any game ever. That's how fucking awful this game is. But enough about this. This is a worse through, which is a walkthrough of a bad game, a really bad game. So I have to explain what's happening. So when we're exiting the church, you have to make sure that Ashley is behind you at all times, because Ashley lags behind all the fucking time in this game. They somehow managed to ruin Ashley's AI even more from where it already was with the original version of Resident Evil 4. And never in the original version of Resident Evil 4 did Ashley lag behind. I mean, she would cower right near enemies and be fucking stupid, because even though you'd be knocking over an enemy, she would still cower next to enemies that had been knocked over. And many other things in Resident Evil 4 OG would cause Ashley to cower. But never, never in Resident Evil 4 OG did Ashley ever lag behind, aside from those instances with the cowering mechanic. But it seems like they've taken the movement system for the AI in Resident Evil 6 and applied it to this game, only they've made it even worse. Because somehow, even though there is plenty of space for Ashley to stay behind Leon, a lot of the time she just lags behind for no reason. And again, it is too much to explain in this one video alone. The poor designs video series I'm going to be doing for this game will represent the movement issues immensely. But I don't understand how A Plague Tale Requiem and A Plague Tale Innocence, a game series designed by Focus Home Interactive, can make it where Amicia de Rune is holding her brother's hand at all times. Her brother is the AI companion in that game. And so you're holding his hand the entire time, and you're able to let go of his hand to just do a free aim. Like, the game practically treats them both as one single entity that you're controlling. So you're never getting any moments where Hugo is lagging behind because you're always holding his hand. But why doesn't that kind of mechanic exist with Ashley in this game? And look at this, by the way. She's lagging behind. Why is she lagging behind? There's plenty of space for her to stay right near me. But no, she's lagging behind because her AI has so much trouble navigating corners. And if you end up moving into a corner or you end up moving through the environment in a way that confuses the AI system so easily, she's gonna lag behind and she will get grabbed. And when she gets grabbed, you cannot shoot the enemy that is grabbing her and make them let her go, because for some reason, the flinch animation issues are still present. Even when they're holding on to Ashley, even though they're not even focusing on you, they're busy being distracted by trying to get Ashley away from you. They're not, like, pulling up their defenses or anything. They're not fucking flinching! And they won't even flinch to a high-powered weapon like a sniper rifle. It's so fucking retarded! But I need to lay off this right now, because we have this stupid cabin sequence. I didn't even get the chance to showcase a lot of poor designs, and I feel like demonstrating the poor designs of the cabin sequence is very difficult to do, because it's all dependent upon how the sequence flows, and a lot of people will just misconstrue the poor designs of this section with just me being bad, and without commentary, it's just hard to explain why this sequence is the worst siege sequence ever made in the entire Resident Evil series. But when you first start the cabin sequence, you have to board up the window that I boarded up. You then have to shoot that barrel at that window to my right in order to kill the 3 enemies by the window. And then you'll need to prioritize these enemies. And after you kill about 6 or 7 enemies, an additional spawn will trigger. And you need to use at least 1 or 2 grenades to kill most of the enemies. And you'll know you've killed the right amount of enemies, because at a certain point in this cabin sequence, after you use the grenades, when you kill enemies, they will spawn wooden planks. And you can get 2 additional wooden planks and put them on the windows down here. And when all 3 windows down here are boarded up, the enemies will not be able to get through. They will come through the windows on the 2nd floor at a certain point, and then there will also be 1 enemy that will come through the chimney. And then at a certain point, the Brute will spawn in, and he will come through the window that is by itself. So it's not the 2 windows on the same side of this cabin area, it's the lone window on the bottom level. And when you kill the Brute, it will cue the end of the cabin sequence a few seconds after his death. And that's all you really need to know. Right now, what I'm trying to do right here is I'm trying to set up at the 2nd floor right now so that I can keep the enemies from climbing. It's what you want to get into the habit of doing after you've boarded up all 3 of the windows down below. And another reason why you'll want to stay on the 2nd floor is so that most of the enemies will just be around the 2nd floor, and when the Brute spawns in, he will be by himself. Of course, that's assuming you don't have any Plagas, because the Plagas on this section are so fucking stupid. The Plaga type A's, for some reason, they have this tendency of just standing still. They're not trying to go towards you, and they're very slow in trying to get to you. So a lot of the times, when you're transitioning between floors, randomly, you'll just be seeing a Plaga type A standing still, and they can spawn attack you. They can do all sorts of stupid things with that whip attack of theirs, and I have done some analysis with the Plaga type A's whip attack. It seems like you're allowed to remain crouched at all times, and the Plaga type A will not angle its whip attack downward. However, its vertical attack, that's the counter it has to you being crouched. So that's what you gotta bear in mind. And Plaga type A's are so badly designed in this game. They somehow managed to make the Plaga type A's even worse than in the original version of Resident Evil 4, because they take an absurd amount of punishment, not to mention the flinch animations are fucking broken with them. And this sequence in general is just not complementary to the game systems. This is why this is the worst siege section in the entire Resident Evil series, because it's a Resident Evil 4-like section that is built for Resident Evil 4 mechanics, yet the mechanics being used here are derived from Resident Evil 2 Remake and also from Resident Evil 1 Remake. And all the mentalities from those games as well clash with the mentalities present with Resident Evil 4 right here. This is why this siege section doesn't work, and fundamentally, it is a broken section. And the poor designs already apparent with the Ganados in this game are amplified even further because of the number of enemies that you're dealing with, the ambiguity on when the sequence ends, the bullet spongy nature to the enemies, the bullshit flinch animations present with them. It just doesn't fucking work. There is a reason why you don't put random stuns in sequences like this. Like, when you're talking about a very lax game like Resident Evil 1 Remake, I mean, the stuns don't even matter anyway, because that game's designed for knife only. Same with Resident Evil 2 Remake. There was no incentive to use the guns in those games because of how lax those games were and how much they didn't even try to be creative with those games or even make the enemies interesting. They just wanted it to be like a mindless speedrunner, just a mindless running simulator with those games. But getting back on the main tangent, random stuns do not work for this kind of sequence. This is a game that is faster paced. Quick decisions matter. Any potential decision you make must have an impact. Otherwise, you're gonna get fucked by the game. That's why the stuns have to be consistent for these kind of sequences, but instead, all you're doing is you're mindlessly using the shotgun to bypass the enemies, and even though I have been going through most of this game without ever firing my weapons because of how mindless this entire game is, I still don't have enough ammo to make the sequence consistent. Not to mention, the shotgun is so useless at consistently decapitating enemies. All because the game decides to take pity on the enemies randomly. And so you then run out of shotgun ammo, you're forced to use your pistol, and you have to keep your distance from the enemies so much because of how much they don't flinch. You're gonna have to use the corners to your advantage and shoot around corners to ensure that the enemies are being a bit more passive, or like the chances of the enemies being passive is higher that way. And it's just, it's so overly technical. You're having to break the game down to such a rudimentary level. You're having to rely upon so much forward knowledge of the section to even stand a chance. And it's all just luck and bullshit, and it's not properly designed whatsoever. There is no challenge with that sequence whatsoever. And the amount of times you get Plagas spawning in, and Plagas take a huge beating on this game if you don't have flash grenades, which I don't understand, not to mention they don't flinch. They're fleshy enemies, and they don't fucking flinch. Like, that's another thing as well with the random stuns. The physical capabilities of the enemies don't match the idea of random stuns. And I cannot believe anyone can look at the way the stuns look on this game and consider them good or believable or just easy to look at or just not cringe when you look at them. It's so fucking stupid, the arguments people have. And this is a great example of how simple-minded and one-dimensional in thinking these individuals are. Random stuns make the game more challenging. Like, what does that even mean? What domain are you placing the idea of challenge into? The whole idea of challenge has to fall within the realm of functional good designs and common sense, and it has to fall within the framework of the game that you've designed. You can't just arbitrarily put random stuns into a game that doesn't have the core designs befitting for that. And relating back to my points earlier, Resident Evil 4 is a faster-paced game where every decision you make has to be done in an instant. Not to mention, there are so many more enemies than what you're dealing with in Resident Evil 1 Remake, 2 Remake, and 3 Remake. Not to mention, the enemies have all sorts of weaponry at their disposal. They can spam grab like crazy. They can spam all sorts of attacks like crazy. They have so much fucking life. Like, everything I've just listed represents the core designs of this game, and they aren't befitting for random stuns like this. All the random stuns do in this game is make you not trust your weaponry, force you to rely upon holes and exploits, and just removes any sense of challenge, any sense of good challenge. What? And there should never be something called good challenge or bad challenge. There's just challenge, and challenge is supposed to exist in the domain of functionality and common sense, not in the domain of stupidity. All the random stuns do is just make this game unbearable even more, among the myriad of other problems present with this game. And speaking of problems, Chapter 6 is a fucking shit show. This is by far the stupidest chapter I have ever played in any game ever. And by the way, that first stealth sequence I did at the start of Chapter 6 is... that sequence is badly designed. The sequence is broken, because there are times when the enemy spots you. There are also times when Ashley can fuck you and you have no control over her. And with how much you're gonna get fucked by these poor designs, you'll have to possibly deal with the reinforcements. And the reinforcements are so badly designed because you're in a claustrophobic environment. You have a brute that is so much faster than you, and when you're trying to go through doors, he does that stupid dodge attack where you have to press the evade button in order to actually avoid his attack. And he can do that while you're in the animation, and if he catches you as you come out of the animation of opening the door, you're completely fucked, and the prompt is not even there. And what I've just described represents only a small percentage of the myriad of issues I encountered in Chapter 6 with that introduction. But now we have this section. This has to be the stupidest boss fight ever in this game. This feels more stupid than Salazar, I would honestly say. Like, Salazar is the worst boss on this game, but this is the stupidest fight in this game, because this is not a fight. The environment and the mechanics together just don't allow this encounter to work whatsoever. So the way this encounter works with the Bella sisters is one of them has access to the checkpoint crank, and it's the one that has long sleeves. So you have got to prioritize her, and there are so many fucking enemies in this sequence that your only option is to hang back over here and use leashing to your advantage to turn off the AI on these enemies. They'll try to run away, and so will the other enemies, but when you go back into the playable area, they will immediately prioritize you. So using this leashing tech, you'll be able to isolate the chainsaw lady that has the checkpoint crank, and she takes an absurd amount of punishment. I don't understand why they give the enemies this much life. Not to mention, the flinch animations present with the Bella Sisters are completely random. It's random whether the stun will trigger or not. It's not dependent upon arbitrary damage values, it seems. And it's not consistent in the slightest. It's just random. And it makes no fucking sense. And also, you got to really make sure that the Bella Sisters are very close to the leashing spot where you're at, so that when they do decide to flinch, you can at least punish them with a knife if they turn their backs to you. That's another thing as well. The only possible way you're going to use the knife on them when they're stunned is if they give you their backs, because trying to navigate around them to use the knife isn't possible, because these enemies, they recover so fast from the flinch animation, the loose movement isn't going to help in getting behind them to do the knife execution, and I don't understand why this is a thing in this game. I don't understand why, with all these flinch animations that you can put the enemies into, the game will not allow you to do knife executions from the front. You have to get behind them if you're in the middle of a combat encounter. Yet the game allows you to do stealth kills from the front. Only during certain sequences, though. I don't know why this doesn't apply to other stealth sequences, because the game just decides what kind of stealth section it wants to be, whether it be one that works fine or one that just doesn't work at all. But if the game's going to allow you to do stealth kills from the front, why does it not allow you to do combat executions from the front? And the thing is, the game does allow for that, but only during very specific animations. When you shoot enemies in the legs. But when you stun enemies in the head, or in some other body part, you cannot do knife executions from the front. And I don't understand why. You've already tied the knife to a durability system. Why would there be such an advantage to doing knife executions from the front? You're just making the game more fucking awkward. And doing knife executions is crucial to stop the enemies from mutating into the plagas. But of course, against the bosses, it does fuck all. I don't really understand the point of the knife executions in the boss fights, because it really feels like they don't do any damage. It feels like they only take off like 5% of a boss's HP. Like, it's really fucking pointless. But other than that, just returning back to the main tangent, this whole entire encounter is just so fucking stupid. And the fact that they can't even make a competent combat system and they're just forcing you to rely upon exploits to make the sequence bearable. And I know a lot of people just use the attachable mines for the bowgun and just spawn attack the sisters, but you shouldn't have to do something as stupid as that. Like, even if it is a thing, why do they not make the bowgun accessible outside of the fucking merchant? And this is another thing I don't understand, right? Like, you can get the pistol, you can get the shotgun, you can get the Red 9 from, like, the first 4 chapters, right? But then you go a long way, and you only get another gun in Chapter 12. Then when you get to Chapter 13, I believe that's the chapter where you gain access to the LE5. But, like, why do they wait so long between Chapters 4 and 12 to introduce new weaponry, and instead restrict all of the weapons to the fucking merchant system? I don't understand. And yet they still go out of their way to design these kind of sequences that feel like they were designed with the merchant in mind. Whether it be through increasing the enemy HP to an absurd degree, putting in so many fucking enemies that the combat just doesn't work very well, or other things that just feel like they need the merchant to just make them bearable, not actually well designed. The merchant only removes a fraction of the issues surrounding this game. The rest of the issues are still intact, regardless of whether you do merchant or no merchant. And that's just how fucking broken this game is. It's clinically confused. I genuinely do not understand the mentalities involved with how they designed a lot of these sequences and how they designed this game. You can just tell this game wasn't QA tested very well. You can just tell that the mentalities put in play here are just clashing with each other to make these really bad sequences. What else can I fucking say about that? But right now, guys, what I'm trying to do right here is, after I've killed the Bella Sister and recovered the crank, the enemies are mainly going to stack up right next to the door that you have to use the crank on. And the problem is, not only do you have so many enemies to deal with, but it takes an absurd amount of ammunition to deal with them. But also, when I was discussing the flow of the sequences throughout this entire game, we just did the cabin sequence, right? The cabin sequence is an ammunition drainer. And I'm sure you probably drained a lot of ammunition on the El Gigante as well. But you have the El Gigante fight, you have the cabin sequence, you then have this, which also requires an absurd amount of ammunition. And then you have like the later sequences of chapter 7 and onward. I mean, just the way the sequences flow with each other. They introduce a sequence that requires an absurd amount of ammunition, so you end up losing a lot of ammunition, and then they introduce yet another sequence that demands an absurd amount of ammunition, and I don't understand why they do this. The pacing and the flow of the encounters in this game are the worst they have ever been. And I can tell because of the fact that on my first playthrough, I had to replay the game 2 times to make my first playthrough bearable. Because the way they've set up the ammunition and the enemy placements in the earlier sequences before certain encounters just doesn't work. It doesn't fit the pacing, it doesn't fit the flow, it doesn't fit the combat, it doesn't fit anything else involving this game's mechanics and mentalities. It's clinically confused. And believe me guys, when you see what I had to go through to get this sequence done in my poor designs of Resident Evil 4 Remake series, or like some separate video I'll be making regarding the sequence, you will understand the clinically confused mentalities of this entire section, and I have so much more to say about how clinically confused this game is for the later encounters. But resuming my main tangent, after I've killed the Bellow Sister and grabbed the crank, I now need to get the enemies away, but I do not want to waste ammunition on them because I know, based on my first playthrough on hardcore difficulty, the sequences coming up are so fucking awful and demand so much ammunition. I have to find a way to not use so much ammunition in the sequence. So what I do is I leave the playable area and return to the previous area. This will then cause the enemies to run away, assuming they were in the middle of trying to come after me because I was in a combat status. And when I leave the area, they go back into a stealth status if I wait long enough. I mean, you have to like reset the room so many fucking times by just leaving the playable area and returning. It's so fucking dumb. But they eventually may choose to set up in an area away from the gate, and then that's when I place the crank in. And the biggest problem is, when you place the crank in, for some reason, Ashley chooses to leave the locker. I didn't tell her to leave the locker. As soon as you place the crank in, she just immediately comes out, and I don't understand why. That's another fucking issue I have with this stupid sequence, because she'll get grabbed by the enemies. And also, this is another stupid thing as well. Why can't you tell Ashley to get on the crank? This game has a command system that allows Ashley to do certain actions if you press the right thumbstick. But why can't you tell her to get on the crank so that she can turn it and then you can defend her from the other enemies? It takes so fucking long to turn the crank, and I don't understand why it does this. And this is why I have to use exploits, because they put way too many enemies in the sequence. It just feels almost endless with the number of enemies you're dealing with in this encounter. And I'm having to rely upon exploits because of how badly designed the combat is on this game. And it just goes far beyond than just simple random stun issues. Like, the random stuns are bad enough as they are, but with the other issues present with the combat, and the way they designed this sequence to almost force you into combat to get the enemies out of the way, and I'm trying to bypass this shit mentality by utilizing the leashing to my advantage to get the enemies away from the gate, so that I can then use the crank properly. I mean, it's all just a fucking mess. It's all indicative of rush development, and they didn't properly QA test anything with that encounter. But there's going to be so much more to say when I showcase my poor designs video of that section. Now we have Torres Mendez. This is definitely the better fight of the game, but it's still a really shit fight. And the way I do this is I set up on this ladder, and I mean, originally I was going to stay up here and just replicate Ether's strategy, but Ether, I don't know if he just has good luck, but he somehow doesn't get screwed by the hitboxes on his attacks when he's on that second floor. But every time I'm trying to replicate Ether's strategy of just staying up there, I get fucked by the hitboxes because Torres Mendez has some pretty shit hitboxes. So instead, I'm going to do my old method. So what I do is I stay behind Torres Mendez, and if I'm close to him, he will then path to the left because he has to path first before he does an attack, and his pathfinding is atrocious. The times when he just goes off in some other direction before he comes to you, it can throw you off in the middle of combat, and it's so dumb. But then that happened, and I did notice this in the other attempts when I was dealing with Torres Mendez, but you know, when you're staying close to him, he will always do that grab so long as he doesn't do the other tentacle attacks where he can instantly place his tentacles on his sides, and it's supposed to damage you, but sometimes it doesn't damage you because the hitbox is so fucking weird. Mainly he will do the grab attack, and I noticed that when I stood in front of Torres Mendez and I was directly in front of him and just very close to him, he always missed with that grab. But for safety reasons, I decided to crouch when I was in front of him so that I didn't get screwed by a bad hitbox. And Torres Mendez, I did get screwed by a bad hitbox in one of my attempts at this encounter, and I'm gonna showcase it in my poor designs video. But right now, I'm just trying to stay close to him. I'm trying to stay in front of him. I'm trying to make sure that I stand to his side because I know he's going to turn in that direction. Sometimes he can use the grab to turn. That can also throw you off, and he can catch you out sometimes by doing that. So, like, if I was behind, like right there. So, like, if I was to his side right now after that grab, he could have used the grab as another way to turn, and he could have caught me. But it seems like his grab is primarily designed for long range. He's not going to be able to grab you if you're directly in front of him, which is very interesting. It almost makes me wonder if that's intentional. Like, they want you to cheese with Torres Mendez so that you have plenty of ammunition for the later encounters, but it really doesn't make a difference. And shooting the eyeball in this back, I don't really notice much of a difference in damage. The only time I ever shoot the eyeball is when I put him into the incapacitated state where the game does give you the option of stabbing it with a knife, but it doesn't do anything. Don't waste knives on this guy. Don't waste knives on any of the bosses. I mean, aside from Salazar, but then again, they do have that golden egg cheese where you can just kill Salazar in under 10 seconds with a golden egg. But as much as people want to say that's well-designed, it doesn't excuse the numerous poor designs present with Salazar, and they only put in that golden egg cheese because they know they did a shit job with Salazar, and so to ensure that players don't discover how shit a development team they are, they put in that golden egg cheese so that people can just immediately excuse the numerous poor designs present with Salazar, but that's for another video. Right now, we've entered the second phase of Torres Mendez, so I stay on the left-hand side of the arena right here, and whenever he does this attack, you've got to time when to move to the side. There's also another flaming pallet attack that he does, which is this, where you just gotta stand still, because he will throw them to the sides. I like to crouch, because I feel like there could be a shitty hitbox with that. I mean, Ether has demonstrated you don't have to crouch under that, but I just like to do it for safety reasons, and that move right there, that's the move that's going to hit you every single time on your first playthrough. But what I'd like to do is I just go off to the left, and I try to make sure I don't go into the fire fully. The thing you need to know about fire is that it doesn't do damage in the first 2 seconds of standing within it, but if you linger any longer, you will take fire damage, so I'm trying to place myself in such a way that I'm not so close to the fire, but I'm also in a good spot to avoid that attack, because there's really no way to instinctively react to that attack if you're in the center of this arena. It's really dumb. And now for this, so what I like to do is stand behind Torres Mendez, and the thing is that he doesn't really have any kind of countermeasure to you being this close to him. He'll instead do his long-range attacks, and I'm guessing this is intentional because they know how shit this game is, and I'm definitely glad that this is the case, but it still doesn't excuse some of the dumb designs with this guy. Like, the fact that he can sometimes push you around and he can accidentally push you into fire is really stupid. Oh, this move right here, he'll grab onto explosive barrels out of nowhere, and you have to shoot them. There is no way to avoid those explosive barrels. There might be a way to avoid it using the iframes provided by going into the startup frames of climbing ladders and dropping down, but it's not really worth it. It's just better to shoot them. But in one of my other playthroughs, I was almost out of ammo when I was dealing with Torres Mendez on hardcore difficulty. If you're out of ammo and you don't have any other guns that have enough range to hit those barrels, you're completely fucked. I don't really understand what they designed that move for. It's really stupid. But whenever Torres Mendez says, "Lord, give me strength," it means he's entered the next phase where he's going to do the same thing as before, but he's faster. So you've got to be quicker on your reflexes and on your movements. But there's the barrel attack again. I don't know how many barrels you have to shoot to actually kill him. In fact, I just wonder what this fight is like if you're only shooting the barrels in the second phase. How many barrels does it actually take to kill Torres Mendez? It probably take like 20 of them, I imagine, because of how pitiful the damage is. Where does he even get those barrels from? I don't understand. Like, this whole entire fight is so stupid with its presentation. It's so fucking anime. Like, the original Resident Evil 4, it really portrayed Torres Mendez as being scary, imposing, and threatening, with his slow movement, with the music, with the fire all around, only it wasn't this extreme. And also with his HP. Like, in the original version of Resident Evil 4, 4 incendiary grenades could kill Torres Mendez fully. And it was the game's way of rewarding you for saving up on your resources intelligently, and for knowing that you're going to be able to use your incendiary grenades right now to clear up your inventory, and then you can get more grenades in the process, because you freed up your space during this encounter. That's how any survival horror game should reward the player for saving up on resources intelligently. But sadly, in Resident Evil 4 Remake, even when I'm being very intelligent, I'm still having to resort to really stupid methods of just breaking the gameplay down to a rudimentary level if I'm gonna have enough ammunition for the later encounters. That just goes to show how compromised this game is from the bottom up. Like, just deep down, this game is completely fucking compromised. If that's how it's going to reward you for just saving up on your resources intelligently. By just punishing you with a bullet-spongy enemy, you'll have no ammunition for the later encounters with the way the encounters flow in this game. It's just so fucking retarded. But moving past that, resuming my tangent on Vittorius Mendez, in this remake, he's so fucking cheesy and corny and anime-like. And his missionary status is just elevated to an absurd degree. He's such a fucking cliche, just spouting all this religious nonsense. He's like fucking Father Mozgul from Berserk, and I can understand them elevating Father Mozgul to being a very extreme, like, missionary or religious figure, but not Vittorius Mendez. It's just such a silly reimagining, and it's so insulting to the original version of Resident Evil 4. And there are going to be a lot more insulting sequences along the way with this game, because every single chapter on this game is terrible. Like I said, this game is a 10 to the negative 50 out of 10, and that's never going to change, no matter how many times I play this game. But I'm going to make a save here at the start of Chapter 7, and that will be the end of this video. And like I said, I have too many bloopers to showcase for this one video alone. I'm going to reserve them for a separate video. And with all that said, that is the end of these pre-alpha stage chapters that just represent how broken and unfinished and rushed this entire game is and why it shouldn't have existed in the first place. And any of you fucking toxic fans out there want to say that I'm the wrong one, please leave your comments down below, because it'll be so entertaining for me to just read these comments and see just how much you people are so fucking retarded and so stupid and acting so much like comedians when you can't see 2 feet in front of you, even when the thing is right under your noses. God, the fucking retards that leave these stupid comments. It's too entertaining. But I'd rather not be entertained. I'd rather be hearing all the comments from people who are actually enlightened and actually realize just how much of a fucking mess this entire game is and why this is the worst game I have ever played in my entire life as a gamer. And it's so bad that I've declared I am going to do a review of this game, not because I want to, but because I need to. And I have got to give a shout out to my subscribers. They have been amazing in putting to words so many of the problems present with this game, and it is going to be so helpful for my review just looking at their comments. So thank you guys so much for that. And with all that said, stay tuned for the future chapters. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.